Alright, Garrett Blevins here with an overview on how to use your JTS AI Power Building program. I'm going to be doing this on an iPhone and showing you how to use it in Google Sheets, though you can also use Excel if you would like to. So let's hop right in. So first thing you need to do when you get the program, it'll be in an Excel format. It's best to save it as a Google Sheets file when you run it on your phone. Just save it as an Excel file again when you send it back to the system at the end of your 4 weeks. The reason you do that is sometimes when you're using Excel on Google Sheets, it can crash. There's just a few stability issues with it, and so it's always good to transfer it over to a Google Sheet format if you're going to be using Sheets to run it on your phone, like I will be in this demonstration. So when you do that, it just takes a few seconds to save it over as a Google Sheet, and then you can see there it has that darker green cross emblem. That's a Google Sheet file, as opposed to the X that stands for Excel with the lighter green. When you go to send it back, all you would do is tap those three dots on the side and just hit Save as Excel before you attach the file to an email and send it back. Make sure you don't send back a link to your program, but you actually download the attachment and send that in the email. The system needs that attachment to pull it up and go through it. So let's open up the Power Building program I've sent myself. If it is zoomed in like it is here, just pinch your screen and it zooms out. Normal functionality. You can see here some of the overview. I'm not going to go in depth here. Just know that this program is organized by press, pull, and lower body. Lower body is your squatting and deadlifting. Pulling movements are obviously pulling movements, and pressing movements pressing. That's going to include your bench, but it's also going to include shoulder work. Pulling movements would include any sort of rowing, but also like bicep movements, things where you're pulling stuff to yourself. And lower body may include some lower back, but it's primarily focused around the quads, the hamstrings, glute, calves, etc. Now you'll see at the bottom of this screen, here's where your tabs are. There are two tabs here, cycle 1 and cycle 2. That would the cycle 2 would only show up after you're into your second cycle. When you're opening it up for the first time, all you're going to have is cycle 1. Each cycle is 4 weeks in length, but that just means it's 4 weeks of programming to line up with when your payment pings. It may end up ending mid-cycle. Like you'll see here, this week 1 is hypertrophy 1 of 5, and so the actual block is 5 weeks long, but you're just going to have that payment ping on the 4th week and send it in. When that happens, if I scroll over to the side, you'll see the weeks are oriented here. The final week is over here at the right. This is a 3-day version, so I could probably get all 3 days in before I send back the file. But if I had this 3rd day left over, maybe I do that on a Sunday, I'm probably going to send my program back in Thursday or Friday just to make sure the system has enough time to process it and I get it on time. It's okay if you have one workout left over when you send in the file, and you should send that when your payment pings. So when you get your program, you may or may not have entered a meet date. If you have entered a meet date, it will appear here. If not, the system will pick a test date for you. Next thing you'll notice is your maxes and then the weight type that you have selected for the current block. You can switch this around depending on what you have available in your gym. Maybe that changes, and you can swap that back and forth as you go through. The next thing to pay attention to is this pre-workout fatigue level, and we advise that you fill this out after 2 warm-up sets, but different people might like to do it right before their top set or even after their top set. And really what you're doing here is you're using a 1 through 5 scale, or injured if that happens, to adjust your workouts. And I'm not going to go through all these, but basically 1 is the lowest fatigue and 5 is the highest. You can read through those a little bit more, but really let's get into the workouts and you'll see how they function. If I'm warming up for high bar on day 1, the protocol here is 1 set of 12 at 3 RIR, and RIR stands for reps in reserve. You'll then see a red question mark. Sometimes this may show up as gray, but as long as it's a question mark in the weight column, you always know that you should write over that with the weight that you use. And then if you see actual RIR in the column next to it and the actual intensity, you're also going to be filling that over as well. That's going to be how the system populates your back offset, and possibly the next week. So we'll see if that happens here or not. It just depends on how the programming and the periodization is set up, if the next week's workout is going to be directly related to your performance the week before, or if it's going to be calculated by the top set of that day. The system looks at a number of factors for that. But as I'm warming up for high bar, let's say I'm feeling really fatigued. If that was the case, then I would come over to the lower body fatigue level here, and I would select maybe a higher fatigue level, let's say 4. That's going to change the way the back offs are populated, but again, I'd be filling that out as I warm up. When I'm looking for this top set, what 3 reps in reserve means is that even though you're doing a set of 12, you're going to use a weight where you could have done 15 repetitions with it, except you're stopping at rep 12, leaving 3 reps in reserve. Now you'll see as I tap in this cell, there's kind of this lengthy formula here. The lengthy formula is really just to either tell you what the weight is or give you that question mark. Since it's giving me the question mark, I know I should double tap the cell, clear it, and then enter in the weight that I actually use. Let's say I used 315 pounds. I'd enter in that for the weight, and then I would put in what the actual rep in reserve is. For the actual rep in reserve, just type in the number. So either 3 if I had 3 reps in reserve, 2 if I overshot a little bit and went too hard, or something like that. So let's say I overshot a little bit and I only had 2 reps in reserve at the end of that set. You'll notice that as I type in that 2, that the back offsets change a little bit here. And so that sort of information, as you put that in, can change what the system does. Let's say I hit the nail on the head and I did 3 reps in reserve. You can see there the back offs are 270, but if I overshot a little bit and I only had 2 reps in reserve, it's going to bump the back offsets a little bit further away. And so you see how those populate automatically. The 37% here just refers to 255 being 37% of my 1 rep max. Obviously it's very low and probably I'd be able to do more than that, but for sake of example, that's what's going on here. We look over to the next week. It still has 2 reps in reserve as the protocol, so this was not one of those where it's adjusting the next week. Next up, let's look at sets across. So this, you can see that there's 2 rows here, but with RDL there's just 1 row. It's 3 sets of 12 through 15 reps with 3 reps in reserve. And so again, when you're doing this, the way I would advise you to do it on week 1 is to use a weight where you have 3 reps in reserve for 12 repetitions. So shoot for that 12, and then as you go further on, you can keep the weight that you use static. But as the reps in reserve change, you can see it's 3 reps in reserve here, but it goes 2 reps in reserve here. What you can do is you can actually try to use more reps within the range using the same weight. So let's say I used, again, double tapping to clear the cell out, and then let's say I used 225 here, and my reps in reserve is, oh, there we go, clear. Reps in reserve was 3 on each set, and again, I'm shooting for that 3 on each set. If you have to pyramid the weights down a little bit, maybe use 225 the first set and then 215 the next set, you could just type in 220 as the weight and kind of know that you're pyramiding up and down to do that. I would also type over this so I remember how many repetitions I had. I did 12. Okay, so when I come over to the next week, I would try to use 225 again, but maybe this time I'm trying to do if my thumbs weren't so fat I could hit those better. Maybe I'm going to try and do 13 reps this week, and maybe when I tried to do that I overshot a little bit, and my actual rep in reserve, I only had maybe 2.5 reps in reserve at the end. But you can see as you go through, on this week I would expect maybe to, still with 225, I might try to hit, there we go, I might try to do 14 reps, and so on and so forth, up until I get to that 15 rep range. And then if I end up getting to the 15 rep range with 1 rep in reserve or something, and I'm actually not at 1 rep in reserve, that's when I might go up to 235. And that's how you would do sets across. Basically that's how you should handle it. And anytime you have sets across, which there'll be a good amount of with these supersets or even giant sets, that's the methodology you should take when you're assessing what weight should I put on. Really the first week you should, if anything, undershoot a little bit, and then give yourself that ability to increase the number of repetitions you use if there's a range. You'll also notice here some exercises, especially if they're based off of your competition lifts, will be a range of percentages. And so when you have a range, you're going to do the same thing as a question mark. Again, it's in red and italics, and usually when you see red and italics, that's going to signal you that you should clear it and write over it with what you did. So the range here is 290 to 310. Let's say I was doing really well this day and was able to use 310. Note that in the actual intensity, there's not the actual RIR. It actually is going to give me the percentage, which is 63% here, and it's going to populate everything for me. I don't need to type over this 63% because it's a percentage-based lift. Again, that's different than the RIR, where I typed in the number of reps in reserve that I had after the set. And that's an important difference. Make sure that you're not typing over or clearing out when it's giving you the actual intensity when you put that in. So you can see that, we'll see that in action again. Again, the red and italics range we will clear, and we may write over that with what we do. But then give Sheets a second and it will start populating the rest. Again, notice how it took a second for it to populate there. So one thing I failed to mention earlier as we were going through, notice that I only adjusted lower body fatigue here. You should always put in your preparedness scale for every lift, pushing, pulling, and lower body. The PS is push, the PL is pull, the LB is lower body. Put those in for every workout, even if you don't have a push or a pull. Just put in your general fatigue then and kind of give yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 how tired are your pressing muscles and your pulling muscles on every day and your lower body muscles. That's going to give the system good feedback about how overworked or underworked or adequately worked you are and make adjustments. Something to note about that is, let's look back down here at competition bench. If after I did that 310 top set I was really gassed and really tired, one of the things I might put in is a 4. And you'll notice as I put in the 4 that this is going to adjust the amount of back offsets. If you're really hurting and you think you can't even finish the workout, you could try using a 5, and you'll notice that the actual number of sets can be decreased with higher fatigue ranges. Sometimes sets will be increased as well with lower fatigue ranges, so just try to be as accurate as you can. And basically that's it. That's all you need to know. There's percentage-based movements, there's reps in reserve, top sets with back-offs, and there's straight sets. And that's kind of the methodology you should have as you go through the entire workout. Different phases will have different sorts of exercises, hypertrophy or strength. Things will get more specific as you go through. Rep ranges are going to change. The way you have reps in reserve and the percentage split of rep in reserve to percentage-based movements, all of that will change block to block, but these fundamentals are important to remember. After you go through and you're getting into the end of whatever the 4th week that you have for your block, send back the log. Again, save it as an Excel file, send it back to the system, and also be sure to fill out the follow-up questionnaire. The follow-up questionnaire will be sent to you as soon as your payment pings. The payment will ping every 28 days. So if you happen to sign up on a Monday and then you start the same day, use the Renew Now feature in the jtsstrength.com website in your account to push that ping forward on a Thursday or something before you need to program. Again, you just don't want to be under the gun as far as when you're sending in that questionnaire and then waiting to get your program back. Another thing to mention just real quick is there are injured now and then rehab weeks. If you are injured and you put that in for a lift, it will remove any movements that use that. So let's say on pressing, instead of having done the workout again, I typed over this 310, so that's why it stayed there. But if I had left the formulas, it would be deleted and cleared out. It'll remove those lifts that are going to be using pressing muscles, specifically bench press movements at that point. It may leave in some dumbbell work because usually when you have an injury, it's going to be something in the shoulder, but you may be able to do the other assistance work. If you can't, simply put in a 0 or something like that for the number of sets. But you can also, once you're cleared by a doctor, use the rehab weeks. And so if you do that, it'll start to give you some rehab protocols that you can do, and you can progress through those. You would do, week 1, if you were able to do that pain-free, then you could move into rehab protocol 2, and continue to move on. And you'll see here, you notice that the sheet showed a little bit of a reference error there for a second, then it went away. Just remember that depending on your internet speed, the program may take a little while to populate all the values. So if things are looking kind of weird, sometimes all you need to do is just give it 2 or 3 seconds and things will resolve themselves. As always, if they don't, email customer support and we'll get you squared away as fast as we can. But that's a cool feature. Again, this isn't medical AI. It's not going to be able to diagnose or fix all your problems, but if you are cleared by a doctor and want to ease back into training, those are really good ways to do it. Also, if you have movements that you can't do, you can always swap those around as needed. The program isn't perfect, and so if it says, do overhead press, but those aggravate your shoulder joints, maybe you do some incline press instead, or maybe it says overhead press and you do dumbbell overhead press instead with a neutral grip. There's lots of little adjustments like that. It's totally okay to do that, and it's also okay, for example, if we had instead of flat dumbbell press or something here, it'd be okay to delete that and say you know, incline, dumbbell press. If for some reason you were working around an injury, make sure you put a note in there for yourself. The system is always going to give you what it thinks is optimal, but it is okay for you as a lifter to make minor adjustments like that as long as you're still using the same muscles. And really, that's where you can dial things in. But keep using the protocols as they're listed because those are very important. The exact exercises, not quite as much, especially in the assistance work. You know, if you're doing a concentration curl or you're doing a standing alternating dumbbell curl, the difference between those is very minimal. But the sets and the reps and the intensities are far more important. So keep that in mind as you use the program. I hope you really enjoy it, and as always, stay on those gains. Blessings.